Well, President Trump's remaking of international trade is escalating as global tariffs take effect this morning, pushing U.S. import duties to their highest point in nearly a century. More than 60 countries and the European Union are now facing tariff rates of 10% or higher, and economists say Americans will almost certainly pay higher prices. As Trump's trade deadline expires, another one looms. The White House is ramping up pressure on Russia to reach a ceasefire with Ukraine by tomorrow or face new sanctions. And breaking overnight, the Kremlin says Vladimir Putin has agreed to a meeting with Trump in the coming days, but the White House hasn't confirmed that yet. CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand is live at the White House with the latest. Natalie, good morning. So what's the White House saying about this potential summit between Ukraine and also with Russia?
Good morning, Michael. Good to be with you. Well, the president, when asked about it, said that there was a good chance he would be meeting soon with Putin and Ukraine's President Zelenskyy. Didn't give many details, but as you noted, Russia saying overnight that the U.S. and Russia have agreed to this meeting in coming days. A Kremlin aide saying that a venue has been selected but will be announced later, and also noting that the target is for next week. But at the same time, these preparations have just started, so it's hard to say how long it will take to actually organize this if it moves forward. Here's more of what President Trump had to say about this potential meeting.
There's a very good chance that we could be ending the round, ending the end of that road. That road was long and continues to be long, but there's a good chance that there will be a meeting very soon.
Now, this follows a face-to-face meeting yesterday between his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Putin. He was asked if there were any concessions made or a breakthrough at that meeting, and he said he didn't want to go as far as to call this a breakthrough. Also noting that he's been disappointed in these negotiations before, so definitely signaling a cautious tone. President Zelenskyy, for his part, has signaled he wants a meeting at the highest leader-to-leader level, posting that on X, saying that we in Ukraine have repeatedly said finding real solutions can truly be effective at the level of leaders. Michael.
And Natalie, let's talk tariffs. As we mentioned, President Trump's sweeping new rates are in effect across the globe. So where do the current rates stand now? And is there any update on trade deals?
Yeah, there's definitely been a flurry of outreach and continued talks, even though these rates that were set a week ago are now taking effect. And the range is from 50% at the highest level, countries like Brazil and now India facing another penalty, which we'll talk about in a second, to a 10% baseline for countries where there may have been a trade surplus and didn't face additional penalties. Switzerland is one of those countries that was facing a 39% rate. Leaders there tried to negotiate, but so far have not been successful. And we know, deals have been reached with certain countries as well as the EU facing a 15% rate. But the president has also threatened if the countries that made deals don't make good on their investment commitments, that they could then face additional punishment. As for other top trade partners, Canada facing that higher 35%. Mexico, negotiations continue, as do negotiations with China. And that's one that we'll be watching to see if they could be subject to a potential secondary tariff for buying Russian oil. Remember, that has been a threat by the president connected to these talks to try to reach a peace deal, that Russia would face steeper sanctions and secondary sanctions on countries that buy Russian goods and energy. We saw that happen with India yesterday. An additional 25% tariff was imposed. Well, China also buys Russian oil. So the question there, will China face a penalty even as these separate negotiations continue?
All right, Natalie Brand at the White House. Thank you. Now let's bring in Jeanna Smialek. She's the Brussels bureau chief for the New York Times. Jeanna, thanks so much for joining us. So how are the president's tariffs affecting U.S. relations with our trading partners?
They're certainly straining them. We have seen, I obviously cover the European Union from Brussels, and we have really seen a lot of strain in that US-EU relationship over the past 6 months. I think we've seen a world where trading partners like Indonesia, like the EU, like South Africa, like many South American countries are really working on shoring up their relationships with one another as an alternative to the United States. And so I think Canada is another prime example of this, where you really see Canada working hard to collaborate more with Europe when it comes to things like military and defense issues, when it comes to trade. And I think that's really a direct outpouring of this trade conflict and the fact that it's just a much more hostile era of relations between other countries and the United States.
Now, I also want to ask, there's been so much uncertainty due to President Trump changing and delaying his tariff deadlines over and over. Now that the tariffs are actually in effect, does this give other countries some stability so they can plan how they'll respond?
Yes, some stability might be the way to put it. I don't think it gives them absolute stability because what we're still looking for, just to take the EU as an example, is a bunch of things that they think they've agreed to actually come to fruition. So from the European Union's perspective, they think that they have a deal for 15% tariffs on cars, but that has not actually been instituted or formalized in any way yet. They think they have a deal for 15% tariffs on pharmaceuticals, but again, we're still waiting on this pharmaceutical final decision. And they think they have a deal on semiconductors, but we don't know about that either. And so I think there's still several shoes left to drop. And I don't think anybody really feels like they have a firm grasp or things are stable at this point.
And Jeanna, Trump has sold this as a move to reorder global trade, put the U.S. first. Now, we've seen prices go up for a lot of goods, but are there any signs that Americans are benefiting here?
I think it is certainly the case that the Treasury is likely to take in a lot of money from these tariffs, at least in the short term. I think that it is the case that they're going to collect some cash from Treasury coffers. As you alluded to, though, the flip side of that is that those prices are likely to end up being ultimately paid by the end consumer. We've seen with previous rounds of tariffs that companies are generally pretty good at eventually passing these things along to consumers. And so you could see a world where, if you're trying to buy some Swiss chocolate or a German BMW, it gets a little bit more expensive. And we are already starting to see some of that feed into the consumer price index.
All right, Jeanna Smialek, thanks for joining us.